All right, I think that's enough waiting. Well, everybody, welcome back for night two of Launchable. Last night was a lot of fun. I had a good time. I think it was maybe the first time in Discord that it felt like everything worked for me, but maybe that was just after having a bunch of practice ahead of time. So we're going to start with just some housekeeping, a reminder. Your mentor and pitch practice scheduling is due by tonight at 7, and that's Pacific time. The link to the sign-up sheet is in the resources channel on Discord, so please take advantage of that mentorship time and that practice time. Hopefully that will all be very valuable for you as you get your projects in shape and get your pitch together. And with housekeeping out of the way, we're going to kick off tonight with a conversation with Rahul Sood. Rahul's entrepreneurial career started right as he graduated high school. He founded Voodoo PC, which was a high-end gaming PC company. He grew that to a globally recognized brand that was ultimately acquired by HP. As a GM at Microsoft, he launched the Bing Fund, which ultimately became Microsoft Ventures, a vehicle for Microsoft to fund and grow interesting projects. He left there in 2014 and launched the esports company, an early crypto innovator unicorn. And today he is running a new venture called Irreverent Labs, which is a blockchain gaming company promising 100-year games. They've recently unveiled Mecha Fight Club, a game about alien weapons that have been turned into cockfighting robots. Please join me in welcoming Rahul. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, it should be fun. So I want to just kind of dive right in to your current venture at Irreverent Labs. The kind of vibe I've been getting diving into NFT gaming is that there's a pretty big divide in the gaming community. There's folks who see crypto and NFTs as the future and the way forward for the new things that we need to build. And then another camp that just as strongly believes that NFTs, crypto gaming are a scourge and are going to ruin their favorite hobby. I assume you're in the former camp with Irreverent Labs, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
I think they're both right, actually. I think that in any sort of gold rush moment, you get a lot of kinds of people coming into the space, and in crypto gaming, there's a really promising future, and that really has to do with like ownership and players' emotional attachment to their characters. It's really tough though to see projects come off the ground where they do like an NFT drop. They promise something down the road, like 3 years down the road, a bunch of speculators jump in and start speculating on the value of the NFTs. And the communities are sort of like fickle. Like basically they'll come, they'll go to the next project and they'll dump their bags, if you will, on the next person. And this happens a lot. Like it happens a lot in a space that lacks clear regulation. It lacks clear innovation, and it lacks vision in many ways. But there is a real future here. And I'm by the way, I'm a longtime gamer. I've been gaming probably longer than, just showing my age. My hair in the picture that you showed earlier was much more flowy than it is now. But I've been playing games for decades, and I still play games today. So I'm an old school gamer, but I do believe in the future of blockchain gaming, and I'm heavily invested in the space, both personally and through Irreverent Labs as well.
What kinds of things do you think that new entrants into play to earn or blockchain gaming in general should be mindful of to avoid kind of running afoul of the things you were talking about earlier that make this space a little scary for gamers? Yeah,
so it's a good question. The first thing I always ask anyone who's getting into the space is why blockchain, right? Like if you're creating a game, why do you think you need blockchain, right? And usually, like 9 times out of 10, you'll have a conversation with someone who will say something like, well, NFTs are the thing. and it's a hot space, and I want to raise money. Basically, all the stuff that you're not supposed to do, they want to do. And if they don't have like a real fundamental reason for why blockchain matters, and why they're building the game on blockchain, then it's not going to work. First of all, it's not going to be a fun game. It'll probably be like a shitty game, to be honest with you. And the community just will not last long. And that's sort of like how you have to think about that. And so I believe that we have fundamental reasons for building on blockchain, and that comes with a lot of experience and a lot of trial and error to get where we are today.
Well, one aspect of that I've been wondering about is that, especially for small studios or indie gamers, one of the big early problems, or two big early problems, are creating your early audience and fundraising so that you can have enough time to build. And I remember with like early Kickstarter in the gaming community, there was like a hype and then crash as people realized that the time from fundraising to game was many years sometimes. And I think like in NFT gaming, I see a lot of projects that could legitimately be fundraising, but they kind of die in that trough. Do you think that it's a legitimate fundraising tactic, and are there ways we could be doing that better?
I think that they shouldn't look at it as a fundraising tactic. I think the way things should be done is you should actually have something kind of built, maybe like an early prototype. But here's the thing about NFT gaming. I have to use Mecha Fight Club as an example, right? What we're doing is pretty interesting. Like we're building a futuristic fighting game where every single character in the game is an individually unique, artificially intelligent NPC that happens to be living on the blockchain as an NFT. So we're using AI in multiple ways on the game. And because of that, and because of this deep storytelling that we're creating and the incredible art that we're putting into the game, we're naturally creating this community, if you will. Like the community loves what we're doing. They think they're falling in love with it. We announced this thing about 5 weeks ago. We have over 20,000 users in our Discord. None of them are here because they were sort of paid. Like we're not doing any paid marketing. We're not doing any weird whitelist swaps or any of that stuff. It's all organically built. And that's because of the creativity that we're putting in the game, the artwork. It's the technology that we're putting behind the game, and the lore, the storytelling. Like to us, the storytelling is a lot of the art that we're putting into the game. So I guess like I can kind of go on a riff here and just kind of explain it. When you think about when an NFT is dropped on the blockchain today, the creator, usually like the artist has spent, like hopefully the artist has spent time crafting something beautiful, like 3D, 2D, whatever that is, music, some type of amazing creation. And they usually end up partnering with a developer or an engineer to release it on the blockchain. And then the creator hopes to build a community. So they try and build attention, resulting in sales. But because of this space and because of the volume that's in this space and that sort of thing, and because of the speculation, once the sale is completed, the community may or may not persist. In most cases, like they don't care, right? The community is like ephemeral. So the art becomes less relevant as less attention is paid to it. So we believe that the NFT drop should be the beginning of the life of that work, not the end of it. So, we believe in the emergence of the metaverse. We fundamentally believe in this. We believe that art, especially characters, in the metaverse should live beyond the drop. So, art should have like self-determined motion, even when not being controlled by a human. We believe that it should have a unique personality, like all of our characters do. And we believe they should be able to acquire skills over time, and they should be adaptable to advances in popular culture, so to be relevant. And by creating characters using machine learning, we're able to do that. And what makes it really cool is the the players, i.e. you get emotionally attached to your characters. So you don't want to sell them, like you want to build them, and you want to play the game. And like I heard you describe the game earlier as this futuristic mecha cockfighting game. It sounds absurd, but it really is meant to be hilarious. Like it's a funny game, and the story that we're building is it's very funny. And it's pushing the edge, which is why we refer to ourselves as Irreverent Labs. Like we don't want you to take it seriously.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about what irreverent means to you? It seems like kind of you've put it at the center of this company. The kind of humor in Mecha Fight Club is, it seems meant to be surprising, and kind of ask you to dig in. Where does that irreverence come from for you, and what does it mean to you as part of the company?
Yeah, so my partner David and I, when we started this, we really I mean, like I hired him not hired him. We partnered while he was working at Microsoft. So he left Microsoft's cyber defense team, and he was running the machine learning team at Microsoft Cyber Defense, working on some serious like nation state issues, like where a nation state might attack the United States government, for example. His team was working on AI bots to combat that and to identify and thwart nation state attacks against the government. Like he was doing some serious stuff. And then when Unicorn got acquired, he called me and said, let's go for coffee, and wanted to share what he was working on outside of Microsoft. He was doing some neat things around AI and that sort of thing. And he was wondering like if I wanted to kind of go lead something to do with AI, specifically in the enterprise space. And I just told him like, after a few days of thinking about it, I said, look, what you're doing is really cool, seriously talented, person. I've worked with you in the past. I love you, but man, this is boring. And like, I have a really dumb idea that I want to share with you. Right. And so I shared with him this idea of this futuristic cockfighting game where all the characters are these like robotic roosters and hens. And they have amateur fights in the cockpit. We do professional fights in the Coctagon. And then every few months we have this Royal Rumble event where it's the apocalypse, right? And each rooster and hen should be like individually unique. They should have beautiful colors, and they should hatch out of these eggs. And when they hatch out of an egg, they pick a name out of a hat. And the names are ridiculous. Like they are, you've got like, you could get an egg, it'll hatch, and you might end up with Oprah Winfrey, right? I might end up with Robocock, and they might end up in the ring on a Saturday night fighting, and we'll just get a link to watch that fight. So the idea of Irreverent Labs just sort of was like, listen, we're creating a game that has a lot of like innuendo and like humor in it that some people might find offensive otherwise if we didn't prepare them for what they're about to see. And a good example of this is when we met with A16Z about this game. We met with them because they invested in this portfolio company that I was like an early investor in. It's called Zrun. It's a horse racing game on the blockchain. And we met with them because we wanted to see what investors look for in the space, right? Not that we were looking for investment, but we started to share the story. The person leading the investment, her name is Ariana Simpson, and she has two other women on the team working with her. There were no men in the room. It was just me and David. I'm sorry if you hear my dog barking. It was kind of awkward at first, right? Like we're thinking, we're messaging each other on Slack saying, oh man, like here we are talking about, like these different roosters and hens with these crazy names and stuff and this humor. And Ariana was writing notes the whole time and she wasn't smiling 8 minutes into the meeting. And then we said, and this is a picture of the hen. And we brought up this picture of this hen. Her name is Tessa, the Cyberclock. So she kind of looks like a Cybertruck, and she's obsessed with Elon Musk. She has her own like Twitter profile, and she messages Elon every now and then. And Ariana looked up from her paper, looked at this picture of this hen, and we said, hens are interesting because there's only 40% of the population are hens, and hens are smarter than roosters. And she started laughing, and she said, "This is hilarious. That's really cool." And that's when the whole sort of thing kind of set into stone, and they got really excited about the game once we started talking about the AI that we were building, the modeling that we're doing, the economic modeling, and that sort of thing. But one thing I wanted to say is, if this is like with Web3, the opportunity is that you don't have to build a monolithic game. Like if you think about a game studio like a Valve, right? When they create a game like Dota, it takes years to build something like that because you're building this crazy game with huge story, multiple characters, skins, like all kinds of stuff that goes into it, right? With us, we're building a series of mini games built on top of four common elements, right? The first element is we're building this beautiful game with beautiful art. We have an artist, the best living artist that I know, who is the creative director of this game. So we're building like the most insane art possible. And then on top of that, we're building a lore. The storytelling we're doing is just, it's unreal. Like if you go to our Discord and you read the lore, you'll get an idea of what we're building there. And then the third layer is the economy that we're building on this game. There's like an economy that's designed to last 100 years, where if you look at other games in this space, I won't name names, but pretty much every game in the play to earn space, if you look closely, not even that close, they almost resemble, I hate to say it, but they kind of resemble a Ponzi scheme in a way where if player growth stagnates, the whole economy collapses. And then what happens, right? So we designed an economy that's multi-tiered, that's a creator economy in this game that will sustain. And it will resemble an economy of like a small, say a very small country, for example. And then the last part that's common among all the games is the AI. So the machine learning foundation that we're building underneath the characters, because the characters sort of carry on from game to game, and your attachment with those characters builds over time.
Can you talk a little bit more about the AI? When I think of traditional games in AI, I think of like waypoint finding and like a hard boss that learns from my moves. I think you're talking more about like conversational AI and personality. Am I right? How does it come across in the game?
Yeah, so we're using AI in multiple ways in this game. So remember earlier I mentioned to you, that we want the personality to be unique and we want them to acquire skills over time and that sort of thing. We're using AI in sort of three different ways. One way we're using it is just in like the simple movement or fighting that these characters have in the game. So we use AI to sort of train the way the birds move in the game. It's sort of like the motion is oriented towards fighting, breeding, like where they pick a mate, that sort of thing. And then eventually it'll expand to all aspects of the bird's life and other characters which enter the metaverse. The field of AI that we're using to do that is something called agent simulation. I'm sure you've probably heard of it, or I'm sure there's lots of people here who have, where the agent can be anything from characters in a metaverse game to like autonomous vehicles, which is really where it started. The problem with agent simulation AI is it doesn't really give you personality. Like it doesn't really create personality with the birds. So this may sound absurd, and I think it's probably best for David to explain this, but I'll try and explain it for you. So to give these birds personality so they don't behave exactly the same way, we're imbuing them from their own genome. So there's this Gallus chicken genome, which we took and we customized it. Like we customized it with traits unique to the Mecha Fight Club, such as like intelligence and things like that. And the expressiveness of these traits is like across populations vary as it does in real life. And so we're using this combination of AI and genetics. We're able to breathe life into art. So in the case of art, it's these characters where we're taking this beautiful piece of art and we're laying the foundation for the characters to acquire new skills using, which is exposed through our minigame format. And so that's kind of the personality part. And then the last part, and probably the most important piece that's often overlooked. If you look at a game studio, like a typical game studio has, a few hundred people to build a real game, right? And the reason for that is like you have creators who create the art. So you have this like amazing artist who comes in and says, here's what the art's going to look like. And it's amazing. They build cinematics and that sort of thing. Central to Web3 is the role of the creator. And then humans in general, like we yearn to create. It's like in the fibers of our being, right? We love to create. But we never want to use AI to create the raw ingredients for entertainment, right? We want our humans, we want our people, our artists to create and feel unencumbered to create. 3D characters, 2D art and textures. Like these are sort of the materials of the new reality, right? So materials of the new metaverse. And they must be created by humans. But the part that is horrible for like humans to create is like the mind-numbing stuff. Here's where we use AI to sort of multiply the creation of the creator economy. So we're basically like, we're automating the process, if you will, from taking a piece of NFT art, which is like created by hand, and bringing it through a pipeline where it goes like from say Blender to all the way to Unity into a game ready asset automatically using AI. So we're building a game, you know, that would typically take say like, you know, 100 plus people, 200 people maybe, with 18 people, using machine learning in a way that will give us like software gross margins in a, you know, in a game. Yeah.
So the reliance there on user created content and community interaction, does that mean that your community can kind of push and pull you in directions that you weren't foreseeing before launch? How much are you operating on a roadmap you had kind of ahead of time, and how much are you going where your audience takes you?
Well, we're always listening to our audience, but not to tell us where to go. We have a roadmap and we're sticking to it. So the one thing I would say to anyone out there building in this space is, do not do an NFT drop and then promise a roadmap. Because if you do that, you end up raising, you really do. You raise a bunch of money by selling these NFTs, making promises that you're going to deliver, and the community gets very frustrated very quickly. Because the way these games typically work is a game will come out, or not come out, sorry, an NFT drop will come out. They'll partner with guilds, and there's thousands of guilds around the world. And we put out a call to guilds a week ago, and we've got over we had over 300 earlier today. It's around 400 now. 400 guilds applying. And what they want to do is they want to buy, or they want us to give them allocation to the NFTs. And then they'll give them to their communities on the ground. Basically, what ends up happening is you sell out of your NFTs to guilds, they dump them on the community at a higher price, and then the community is left holding the bag wondering, where's the game? And the game isn't there yet. So my recommendation is, if you have a really great story and you've got a really great game concept and you have a team that can deliver and can execute, you can go raise money, you know, from like Madrona and just say like, this is what I'm building. Here's the idea. Give us some seed money and let them seed fund you for a year so that you can go and get that traction. So you can actually have a game ready by the time the NFT drop happens, right? And we had an interesting meeting with our lead investor yesterday. We only started this in November, to be honest with you. Like, okay, kind of. I mean, my son and I scripted this thing all last year. We came up with this concept and stuff, but we really started grinding in November. And so we got our first investment in November. We weren't planning on doing a Series A until maybe like the July, August timeframe. And we had an interesting meeting yesterday with our lead investor, with the broader team who'd never seen the project before. And then the meeting was supposed to be 30 minutes. It ended up being a little over an hour. They were inquiring about, you know, the economy and the AI. They wanted to see the progress we made. So we showed, you know, examples of what was going on. And then we got a call immediately after saying, hey, you know, we don't really feel like you need to wait for your drop. Like, you guys want to raise money now, we can just do it now. You don't have to worry about money in the future. I mean, it's a pretty good position to be in. So my point is, if you have a good VC behind you, they will back you. They're not going to just, Madrona in particular is not going to invest in a seed round and then walk away at a Series A. Like they don't write checks like that, right? So they want to go long with something like this, and I think that's the key to this space. Is if you have a great story and you have a great team, you can pretty much raise whatever you want, and then not worry about the NFT drop being, you know, part of your raise, if you will. It should be part of your product.
So this might be a little bit of a tangent, but you mentioned that you're building this company with your son. I'm a dad of young kids. That sounds kind of like a dream come true. Is the entrepreneurial trait something that you're hoping to pass down, and how's it been working together?
It's not something you pass down. You're either born with it or not. I have 3 kids. My older 2 are not born with it. My daughter works at a cryptocurrency exchange in marketing. My middle son is an absolute genius, and he works at Microsoft, and he'd never leave. He loves his job. He's working in Azure in Cosmos DB or something, Cosmos DB. But my youngest son is an entrepreneur. He's 19 now. He's going to UW, and he's very entrepreneurial. So you can tell, right? With kids, you never want to force them into doing something. They just do it because they want to. So, you know, and I kind of grew up in an entrepreneurial environment. My dad was an entrepreneur. So he's definitely, he's going to school. You know, he wants to get an internship. He'll likely intern with us next summer because he's working with us now. We'll see, you know, we'll see where it goes. I certainly don't want to force anything on him, but if he does well in school, I told him he can get a paid internship in the summer. Right now he's unpaid. And then we'll see what happens.
Well, good luck. I mean, getting him as an unpaid intern is working out for everybody, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's working out. Yeah.
So along the line of kind of entrepreneurship, I was reading some of your blog posts, and there was one quote that stood out. I wanted to ask you about it. I think this was the time you were leaving Microsoft Ventures to start Unicorn. You said, I basically created my dream job and now I'm leaving it. This is the kind of crazy shit entrepreneurs do. What to you is the drive that makes you want to leave behind a comfortable situation and kind of go out on something untested and risky and kind of uncomfortable and scary?
Well, complacency, right? You know, once you get complacent, you get lazy, depression kicks in. Like for me, it does very quickly. So, you know, the job was amazing. Microsoft is an incredible company. I have nothing but good things to say about my experience there. Even the politics, which I hated, I still feel like the company is an amazing company. And I worked with some incredible people, built some great relationships. My business partner at Irreverent Labs is from Microsoft, right? And it actually, that quote, that whole reason that I left was because of an event that we did. We opened an accelerator in Berlin, and Steve Ballmer was opening it for us. Like he was speaking first, and then I was speaking right after him. And I was really worried actually that Steve would go up and like, cause there was a bunch of like startup people from all over Europe there. I was worried that Steve would go up and like just talk Windows or something. Like I didn't know what he would say. You never know with him, right? Even though I can say one thing, he was always the smartest guy in the room, regardless of the room that he was in. He was very, very, very smart. And he went up there and he talked about the story of how he joined Microsoft when it was a $2 million company, and how it went from like $2 million to, you know, he said, oh, it's kind of a startup, but not really. But now it's like a $300 million company at that time, right? And it was, everybody was on the edge of their seat listening to his story. His story was amazing. It was such a good story. And then I went up and started talking about the accelerator, and I was thinking, here I am talking about entrepreneurship, and I'm getting paid a lot of money to work at this big company. Like, what am I doing here? And that was the epiphany moment for me. I had to leave. So yeah, so that was it.
Thank you. That is a good story too. So when you made that change, you were starting Unicorn, and Unicorn, you know, had some pretty famous run-ins with regulators. We've got a bunch of folks here looking to get into crypto spaces and start crypto companies. Well, we've got a global audience here. Many are located in the US, though. Do you have any insights from your experience around the regulatory environment and what people should be prepared for?
I do. So the first thing I would say is we at Unicorn, we dealt with two different kinds of regulators. One regulator that had their shit together, which were the gambling regulators, because we were a gambling company. Like I was on 3 different licenses. I was on a New Jersey license, I was on a Malta license, and an Isle of Man license. Getting on a gambling license not only takes a lot of work, but it requires like an impeccable background. And they go through everything. I mean, everything, right? So from a gambling standpoint, we were like the hot shit, if you will. The crypto stuff though was wild. Like we started building in 2014. We built a token economy by 2015 for Unicorn. It was called UKG, and it became the center of our ecosystem. Everybody was using it on our platform. And by 2017, we took UKG, which was blowing up, and we put it on the Ethereum blockchain. And then we were like the hottest company around. Everyone was like, oh my God, these guys are geniuses. Who's their CEO? You know, it was great until the market collapsed in 2020. And then I was like the biggest moron, if you will, right? And nobody in Silicon Valley wanted to touch us because the market collapsed. Bitcoin went from 20,000 to 3,000. And then the SEC started to inquire with a number of different things. First, they went after a lot of frauds, which is a good thing. But then they went after like some good American companies. We had a lot of attention on our company because we had people like Mark Cuban and Ashton Kutcher invested in our business. And they started to inquire. And it was a nightmare process. It was a process of dealing with regulators who, some of whom knew what they were doing, few of them, say like 9 out of 10 of them did not. And they didn't know exactly where to take this. But the cost of it, the stress of it, dealing with it for 2 years, dealing with lawyers, trying to, you know, sort of justify our position, which we would have won if we had gone longer with it, right? If we had just had a, first of all, a good law firm, which we did not. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was a very big law firm in Seattle, and it was the worst experience I've ever had dealing with a law firm, right? And then on top of that, you know, just the idea that securities law could change based on, you know, old laws, but their interpretation of it didn't matter how good the opinion letter we had was. Opinion letters are only as good as the piece of paper that they're written on. And the most frustrating part was that there was somebody within the SEC who was a commissioner who wrote a dissenting blog about the whole experience with us because she felt that we were in the right. And you know, at the end of the day, we just said, "What do you want?" And they just said, "We want you to kill the coin, and you know, and then set up a fund to refund the customers." And so we agreed to that. We agreed to their terms. We shut down the coin. We paid amount to the SEC so they could refund the customers, and then we settled. Everything was good then. And then we went back to focusing on our business. And at that point, we had 4 different companies pursuing us. And one of the largest gambling companies in the world took about a year because the negotiation was tough because I didn't want to stay on. And there was a few things that we needed to make sure that we got out of the deal. But they made 4 offers to us. And the final offer we took. So we sold to Entain by August of last year. So what ended up happening was the company did really well in the exit. The investors did very well. The employees, they all got fantastic jobs, including my partner. They all moved to Entain. And they're working there now, building out Entain's global esports betting business. And I just didn't want to be part of the gambling business anymore. I wanted to go start something else. So here I am now. I just want to end by saying one thing, that regulatory experience that I dealt with was horrible, but it wasn't enough to make me like not believe in crypto or the space. I kept going. And still, we even made a pretty decent investment in Zed Run, which is a horse racing game. And we did this during this whole fiasco. And we made a good bet on it. Like that company has done extremely well. You know, there was a time when we invested in Zed, and there was a time when during the pandemic where they were running out of cash, and no one would invest in them, because, you know, no one wanted to touch crypto or blockchain. Any investor that I spoke with didn't want to touch it. So I called up a friend of mine who runs a very large cryptocurrency exchange in Bellevue. It's quite well known. And I said to him, like, hey, this company needs money. They need $1 million. And they're pretty fantastic. He looked at it. He spent 15 minutes on it, literally 15 minutes. And he wrote $1 million check at an $8 million valuation. The company a couple of weeks ago signed a term sheet at a $750 million valuation. So, you know, so that type of conviction is important. It's important because we're in a space that is still, the regulation is unclear, but it's getting better. There are people out there that will talk shit about the space because of all the scams that are going on, or all, you know, the stuff that you alluded to earlier with NFTs and you know, and the environment and all sorts of stuff will come up. But if you're convicted and you're building something, you just got to keep going, and eventually everything will work out.
That's a nice optimistic note on the regulatory experience. That's an interesting point that you were making an investment even while one company was getting hammered, and that was kind of a sign of your optimism for the long term. Cool. So I've got a couple more questions of mine before I turn to questions from the audience. Earlier, you talked about how you've been a gamer for many decades, or decades at least.
Many.
I wonder, I wonder what are your favorite games right now, and what makes them your favorites?
Well, I would say my favorite game right now is League of Legends still. And it's been 10 years I've been playing it. No, probably closer to 8 years. Yeah, I've been playing for about 8 years now. And it's a game where the reason I like it is because it's not like super fast paced, but it's also an interesting game where you're playing against people from all around the world that you don't know. My issue with League is, I've got a lot of skins. So skins are basically, things that you buy for a character that lock to your character that you can't trade or sell. And I have no emotional attachment to any of the characters in the game. So like I could be playing Fiddlesticks today or Master Yi or whoever it is. And like, I don't really care about them because you could be playing the same characters tomorrow and they're all the same. So, traditional gaming is you're playing a monolithic game that you like to play. You play it because you get entertainment out of it. But when you think about each game takes about 45 minutes and 3 games in, you've already wasted, a good portion of your life playing this game and you got nothing out of it. And you could have been on your bike. And I tell myself that every day. I still play it, but you think about what that means in terms of like the Web3 opportunity and ownership. It just creates such a massive like epiphany for me. It's like, I want to own my character. I want to feel like I'm putting time into that character. I'm getting a bond with that character. And in the end, when I want to leave the game or I choose to leave the game, it will be difficult for me to sell that character, not because I can't put it on the market and it'll sell instantly, but because I have such an emotional connection with that character in that game that it would be a hard thing to do. And that's where I see the opportunity in this space.
So turning to some audience questions and kind of segueing with League. Do you know of anyone building MOBAs on the blockchain yet?
I do. I don't. I do only like I know of one game in particular that actually had a lot of promise years ago. They were building on not on blockchain. They were building a MOBA game, and now they've sort of resorted to blockchain. The problem is that you'll see a lot of this. You'll see a lot of like old school game studios who could never get funding and run out of cash, who are now coming into the blockchain space and saying NFTs. Why not? But they don't have a real thesis as to why. So it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch that because you got some incredibly talented people trying to sort of shoehorn themselves into the space, and then you see like projects like Pixelmon, which basically is a is a joke. Like it's a disaster. These people person created this thing with a big promise, used some great graphics, Minecraft assets and assets from Unity, and ended up selling $70 million worth of these assets. And they ended up being a total, I just, it was a fraud. Like at the end of the day, what they created was a joke. And it was a complete disaster. It wasn't what they promised. And they're still holding on to the money and they're still working on building this game, which I don't think will ever happen. So you kind of got like two extreme dichotomies there. I think the old school game studios who are trying to shoehorn their way into this need a better thesis in order to do that. They need to find like a technical co-founder who really understands the space and can think sort of deeply about what metaverse actually could mean. One thing I will say is this, that people tend to go to LinkedIn and they look up blockchain to see, I need to find a blockchain engineer. You don't. What you need to find is a software engineer. You need to find somebody who really deeply understands software engineering because creating smart contracts is really easy for a seasoned software engineer, and they'll do a much better job than a typical blockchain hacker would do. Yeah.
So to the topic of why blockchain for a game, one of the questions from the audience is, why did you approach this AI NPC as a blockchain NPC as opposed to doing it with traditional tools like an NFT in the cloud?
Yep, it's a good question. You know, when we have you ever seen the movie Free Guy? That goes to anyone in the audience. If you haven't seen the movie Free Guy, okay, there Maria has. So you have to watch it. Yeah, it's got Ryan Reynolds in it, and Ryan Reynolds plays an NPC in a video game and doesn't realize it, right? So he's a non-player character in the video game. Non-player characters get beaten up all the time. Like in Grand Theft Auto, the non-player characters are the background characters that you beat up, you steal their car, you know, you take their money, and then you drive away, and then they get up and they walk around like nothing happened. So, you know, so we thought, because NFTs makes this opportunity to make things unique, why not make their personality unique? Why not make everything unique about it, so that when you're watching a game, when you're watching a fight, it's a different fight every time. It's almost like we're creating the pipeline for automated Netflix. Like we have basically created the tools to take art, and I didn't even get into this, but like I told you about how we're taking art and we're putting it through the pipeline to create it into game ready asset. We're doing the exact same thing with machine learning, where we can take a personality, we can slap an AI onto it using the you know, agent simulation AI. We can attach any character to it that's created by, you know, the community, and then we can put it into the game. We can drop it into the game using tech. And so Irreverent Labs is a deep tech company that happens to be building 100-year entertainment experiences on blockchain using the Trojan horse of a mecha cockfighting game to make this technology available. That technology will be available to other companies one day as we start to sort of develop the game. We're going to take some of that tech and bring it up to Irreverent Labs and make it available broadly. Did I answer your question? Because now I forgot what your question was.
Well, you talked about AI assisted creativity, which I think is endlessly fascinating. So it was a great answer no matter what.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. So why did we do AI rather than a traditional game? Because that's why. That's exactly what everything I just said. It's like, you know, we wanted it to be different, but not just different. We wanted it to be a game that no one else has seen before. And the mechanics of the game, the way it works is, you'll get an email on a Friday night, Jeremy, and it'll say, "Hey, Jeremy, your rooster Robocock is going to be in the ring against there's a bird that just the first name that came to mind was Vladimir Putin Cage. By the way, that name was voted by the community before the war started, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But basically, you'll see the statistics of Vladimir Putin Cage versus Robocock, and you'll be like, oh my God, Vlad is going to kick the shit out of my bird. Like I can see it right now, right? And here's a link to watch it. So you really have no choice. You either watch the fight or you don't. If you don't watch the fight, they're going to fight anyways, and people around the world are going to watch it. If you do watch the fight, you get to learn about your bird. So your job as a player is to learn about your character, to see what fights they're good at, what they're not good at, that sort of thing. If you opt out of the fight, you can opt out by buying a fight pass and getting out of it completely. The thing that makes this game unique, other than everything else, is the more human interaction the birds get, the more they earn in the game. They earn these things called bucks, which is the token that is produced proof of play in the game, and the more people that are watching and the more interaction they get, the more bucks are produced in the game, and they earn more. It's pretty neat. Yeah,
Whoever your chief pun officer needs a raise.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's all of us. It's like, yeah, it's all of us. Yeah. We actually so our team is mostly based here in Seattle. We, you know, all of our core blockchain and core machine learning team is here. Our artists are based in Las Vegas, and our storytellers based in Michigan. And then we have a team that I've worked with in the past, a small Unity team based in Ukraine. So they were mostly in Kiev, and then they moved to the West. So they're in Lviv now. And this team and there's one lady who just moved out of the country, and there's another guy who was able to get out, and he's in Portugal now. This team meets with us almost every day. Like still, you know, they're still meeting with us, and they're still delivering, and they're still doing their work. And they are concerned about their country. They're concerned about their jobs. They want to continue to drive economic development in the country. And they just continue to deliver. I've never experienced anything like this before. I've never, been in a situation like this with this team. But I have to say, like, we had a meeting on Monday, and they're all there, and we're talking, and everybody was talking about the game and deliverables and kind of laughing and stuff. And at the end of the meeting, I just had to stop it and say, hey, listen, I want to thank all of you for all the great work that you're doing. And like, more than anything, we cannot put ourselves in your shoes, even though we're trying to, right? It is really difficult for us to do that, but I just thank you for everything that you're doing. And like, some of these people on the team, like there's this guy who has like a big beard, and you don't appreciate the fact that the barbershops have shut down. So, as a team, you kind of laugh and you say, oh, Alexi, your beard is like, huge. You look really good. But it's like, man, we just have no idea what they're going through. Right. And like Web3 has made it possible in many ways to do these sort of like work with creators around the world and give them upside and opportunity in places where they normally wouldn't have. In any case, I don't really know where I was going with this, other than to say, when we started this game, we have a thriving community in our Discord. A lot of the people are from Russia. A lot of the people are from Ukraine. These people were like brothers and sisters up until a couple of weeks ago, and then it's just been really strange kind of dealing with this situation. So I hope it ends soon, but man, it is not easy. Like, just seeing that as part of what we're building, it's not easy. Probably more challenging than dealing with the SEC. I deal with them like any day of the week compared to this shit. So
yeah, their weapons aren't as scary. I hope your team in the Ukraine is able to stay ahead of the danger and stay somewhere where they feel secure enough to keep working and keep chugging along. I don't, this is just kind of a flyer. If you have any particular charities that you think are doing good work in helping folks who are fleeing and trying to stay safe, I'd love to pass that along to this group. Thank you for your time. This has been an awesome conversation.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say, we just donated to, Ukraine, the actual Twitter account, the government Twitter account, using cryptocurrency. I think that was like the best thing we could have done. And also we help our team as much as we can. So there's probably lots of ways to donate, but being able to give to somebody directly who needs it right away is impactful. That's why I love crypto. And I think it's a really good, I don't hate to use the word use case, but it really is. Like when they're basically leaving their homes behind and they have nothing with them, you could throw crypto in their wallet while they're moving in a bus somewhere, and they can use it there. So it's a crazy world we live in. Anyways.
Yeah, all the more need for irreverent escapes sometimes. Thank you, Rahul.
The escapism is always good. Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. That was a super fun talk. We've got another one coming up with Matt Sorg. So Matt, I know you've been waiting in the wings up here. Formerly from Riot Games and then Unity, Matt is currently leading tech and product at the tech and product aspects of gaming at Solana. So we kind of got a gaming 1-2 punch here tonight. Tonight, he'll be talking about how gaming can be a gateway for mainstream adoption of blockchain technologies. And as you did in the last talk, if you have any questions, please share them in the chat. And if we've got time at the end, we will get to them. Thank you, Matt. Welcome.
Hello. All right, I'm gonna share my screen here. I put together a very, I'll call it an engineering centric presentation here. It's only like half a presentation. It's more like talking through, because I was thinking, I'm going to be talking about kind of Solana and kind of Web3 stuff, but I really kind of want to keep it dev focused, because it's like a building thing. It's about how you think about your projects long term. So I just have a few disclaimers here. This is definitely not financial advice or anything. And feel free to interrupt and ask any questions along the way. And yeah, I'm definitely going to be focusing a lot on kind of like technical and product things, and even going through different documentation and things, and like how to get started on Solana, if you are so inclined, by my first few slides. So first, like, why Solana? You don't really have to think about fees. So we have sub-cent fees. They're actually very much sub-cent point. Actually, it's even lower than that now. That's kind of like at the all-time high. They're usually 0.025 cents right now per transaction. And some of these things, like a lot of different chains will highlight different parts of their theoretical capacity based on something. I'll go over this in a little bit, but ours is very real. We've never had a full block. And we've had some congestion at times, but I can talk about that in FAQ or something out later. But definitely scale and very real capacities. The other thing is the way that our consensus mechanism works. There's less in the way of block conflicts, so our confirmation times are very, very fast. Basically, it makes it just seems like Web2 scale, where our Web2 speeds, like time it takes for, you're at a cash register, and you press the button, and how fast does your thing go through. And we still do this while maintaining decentralization. Actually, these numbers are really outdated. This is actually almost 1600 plus right now, but I was about 1500 plus for accuracy. These are independent validators. There's no reason to have duplicates. Some people, but yeah, so 1500 independent. Yeah, and so it's very decentralized. Like, for reference, like as Ethereum goes to Ethereum 2.0, they'll have probably around 4,000 to 6,000 validators. So we still have a room to go. This is one of our main concentrations of our foundation, where a lot of our grants goes, proliferating that. But yeah, definitely excited about where we were. To show you the growth of this last year, I think at this time we were at about 200. But that's because we only launched, like, the Solana blockchain has actually only been around for about a little over a year and a half. Yeah, tons of ecosystem projects. Also, this is old. This is at least 7,000 at this point. It's funny. Yeah, and so there's a lot of. I think I totally agree with what Rahul said. You don't really need blockchain developers. You need developers, and Rust is some of the some of the best developers, and Rust itself is one of the best languages out there. Offers you a lot of both performance and kind of thread safe security things, so you don't make mistakes at live. I mean, you can still make errors for sure, but a lot of kind of runtime errors and memory safety and all these things that are really hard in blockchain, and really like actually cost you money in blockchain is really good here. Yeah, we're actually in the middle of a hacker series. If anybody's interested, we'll be doing events all year. So if you just are so inclined, cities all around the world, and so that really like helps you kickstart your connection with the ecosystem and things like that. All right, so kind of the way like some people like to think about this, which I think is really interesting too, is kind of the Web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. There's different ways, but I thought this one was pretty interesting. That we worked with a few people in the ecosystems. Kind of, this is the ownership era of content, where you still have a lot. Obviously every era kind of builds off the previous, so you still have all the capabilities of the previous ones, but now you have these marketplaces. So you kind of have these revenue sharing, fees off of NFT sales, and upfront, and then fees off the trading markets, and you have token appreciation models, and platform tokens that are themselves can gain value. So there's a lot of combinations in there. But the big down in all this is there's generating a whole economy here, that it's not just a totally consumptive model where people are taking from you and you are paying them money. You can kind of think of that as like a one-time consumption of a digital good, where it then goes away in terms of its ability to do anything else. It is now just you have it. You can continually use it for sure in a lot of these models, but yeah, it's then kind of consumed in terms of its ability to do move anywhere or have other utility outside of the site that you have it. So these are more open, like when you start sharing your data and sharing your data in a way that everybody knows who owns what, you can start generating these economies on top of that, where people have actually built on top of it, which I think is a very interesting concept. And you can also monetize off that yeah, so that's kind of like the next wave, if you will. Okay, so continuing on with kind of like the why, how Solana fits into this, I'm going to get mildly technical here. This is a blog that Anatoly, the brainchild, whatever, of Solana co-founder, wrote a few years ago about the 8 core innovations. I'm not going to go too much into these, but this is what I'm talking about when there's very real differences. It's not just a consensus algorithm. People talk about proof of history as kind of like the branded reason why we're fast. And that is definitely one of the reasons why we're fast. It's what prevents a lot of merge conflicts. It makes it so we don't have to gossip throughout our protocol in order to define who's confirming the block, a bunch of really, really positive things. But when we're setting this up with firmware engineers and a lot of networking engineers, people who had worked at Qualcomm or people who had worked with cell phone services and things that really understood what it took to do this at world scale, global scale, and have kind of make use of this central clock. And so there's also an optimizer in the kernel, like the way that we do memory, parallel computation on chain. So a lot of other people, I think every other chain that I know of does compute sequentially on one thread. And that's why they have to scale through having shards. So they have to have multiple blockchains that are all single threaded. We've managed to do multi-threading, which is really important when you think about like scaling in a single state, which I'll talk about over time during the course of this presentation. But you can think of it as like if myself and person B are doing a transaction, and then maybe person C and person D somewhere else are making a transaction. This can happen in parallel because they're not really in conflict with each other in terms of a ledger or anything like that. But then if I wanted to trade with person C next, I would be able to trade with them. And it's totally fine. And it's like really scalable that way because we're all sharing the same data. And this really matters a lot when I'm going to get into the programming model next. But I just want to kind of like go through that because that's a really important factor, and that separates us along with these other plenty of other optimizations around the way we do our programming model. And yeah. All right. So I think at the core of this is the way we do accounts. And there's basically 3 types of accounts. We have data, program, and native accounts. But I'm not going to go too much into that. I just want to say it's basically a bunch of like a very efficient data store. And here's a representation of it. And what this means at the highest level, I know this can get really confusing, is basically we just separate the execution of stuff on chain with the data. So those are 2 different concepts. On Ethereum, all of the other like EVM worlds and other things, they are the same. If you just deploy a smart contract, you have to deploy both the data and all the functionality of that data in one smart contract or some like complex model ranging around that. On Solana, if you deploy a smart contract, what you're actually doing is you're deploying a functionality which exists as these as programs, and these programs can be used by anybody at that point, and they sit on as executables on chain, and they don't store state. All the state is stored in these whether these token accounts or these owned accounts, these accounts that are people like us own, and they are governed by the functionality of these other accounts that do them. And I know that's like pretty high level, but what that allows us to do is we publish, and Metaplex publishes open standards for a lot of things that happen on chain. So like a token on Solana, you don't have to redeploy an ERC 721 or an ERC 20 every single time. You just call our token program, and it has all the functionality in it. You just call as a user of somebody who's deploying the token, can just put in your configuration in an API call. And that is very powerful as a concept, because you're not copying pasting code even. You're not even having to do Rust programming or even Solana programming. All you're doing is calling it through an API. I'll do that. So you just call our API and you can execute arbitrary things in here on chain. Anything that you want to do on Solana can that exists through SPL, you can call through these. You can get accounts, you can understand a lot of different things and call all the instructions that you want, all without having to just deploy onto the actual like Rust code or Solana code on chain at all. You just again for standard things. And then one step on top of that that makes it really easy is we have Metaplex, which defines a lot of our standards for things like NFTs. NFTs are super popular. And so this is, I think the Solana blockchain, I think is minted over 8 million NFTs at this point, following the Metaplex standard. And that dwarfs even in, I don't know, 8 months or so. And that dwarfs Ethereum. And it's because it's kind of plug and play. Now there's issues with that. I think Rahul touched on those a little bit. Like sometimes buried entry can be okay, but we're addressing that in other ways. But the buried entry can be really good from a product perspective because you don't have to. You can put more things that have ownership on chain. And so generally, what you do is like you kind of clone this repo, and then you have this API which has a little documentation, and then you basically just put in the metadata you want. You define your collection. This is all just gets inserted with a regular JSON blob. You don't even have to be really that technical to be like, oh yeah, okay, I just defined who owns what, the data that's going to be inserted, is it mutable. You just have some configuration options. You have your your token standard, and then you have optional to define it as a collection. So like, I don't know, your Mecha Fight Club Genesis collection, and then, yeah, we even have like cool things like number of uses. So if you have like a physical good, was it used or not? So somebody knows if this was consumed, or maybe it's a digital good that only has a certain number of access tickets or something like that. You can have all these things in this standard. Yeah, and so all you're doing is just putting that into a JSON blob and inserting it. Here's some examples that we provide. And the thing here is you can put any data you want in these things. Like this is just data that lives on a shared database. So the main thing about having the standard is so it gets displayed correctly on like marketplaces and things. And so anybody in the ecosystem can display it correctly. So if they see this URL to this image, you can go to Arweave, and actually I'm so curious, what is this image? What are we? It's probably just like a Metaplex logo. Oh, that's hilarious. Okay. Yeah. Oh, the docs don't have a proper thing. Anyway, so all right, see, yeah. So you just, you define this, and then you define the attributes in the right way, or whatever you want to do. And then each marketplace will know how to display these, or that they get to choose how to display it, but they know what attributes to expect because everybody's following this specification, and that's it. It's as easy as inserting this JSON blob. You still have some options too, like this article, this image doesn't have to go to Arweave. You could put it to somewhere else. You could put it to your favorite IPFS. You could put it to S3 if you wanted to do a more centralized solution. So there's still a ton of options here. Yeah, and so we even like there's video formats, AR, VR formats that and again, you can put any data you want. These are just formats that if you put them in this way, that anybody following the standard will know to expect it there and then to display it in the right way. Yeah, and if you have any questions, you can still work with individual things to individual marketplaces or whatever you want to accept it to do it correctly. Yeah, so this makes just development very, very smooth, and you can turn around your idea pretty quickly and concentrate on the other parts of your project that you want to work with. Let's see. So I went through a little bit of the library. There's a bunch of other things in there. Like you can do staking of your tokens, swapping, lending. All these things are kind of standard. You can have these farms. But the thing, I was looking through the companies for this, and I saw a lot of governance. So not only do we have a whole governance thing in here that you can just basically, we have our standard governance. Again, you just put your configuration into a JSON payload, and then you can have all your configurations on what kind of governance you do. We even provide reference materials for front end. And so this is one such example. So Realms today is something that we work really closely with Mango, which Mango Markets is one of the major marketplaces on Solana. And yeah, you can just see a bunch of DAOs. So the chartered ones, basically they go through a process on an open GitHub to get approved. And there's a bunch of just uncharted ones that are doing random stuff. I'm sure some of these are varying quality, I'm sure, but open standard. So yeah, this one is like a donation site. I think it raised like 1.4 million. We were just talking about this, so you can kind of see some of the donations coming in. Yeah, so you can use that, and you can build on top of this. So this is just one example of people building on top of it. If you're building a DAO or even like a service for DAO, you might be finding some way easier representation to make a DAO and expose that to your users in some way. Even though under the hood, you're not even doing that much on-chain programming. You're just calling our SPL program, and it's totally fine for you to do that. This is an open source thing. It lives on chain as a permissionless executable. You're totally fine to build your own front end on top of it and monetize that based on good UI. You can make DAOs of DAOs or some bunch of complex structures from this. We just make the primitives and allow you to build on top of it. Yeah. Okay. So I kind of guess like as I wrap up this, I think kind of the main selling points around the shared state model that I was talking about earlier isn't just the performance of everything, the fact that we're parallelizing. That obviously, like, this isn't just like a problem, a solution looking for a problem. The benefit here is like composability. We have this thriving ecosystem, and so many things are building off each other, and that's why our DeFi ecosystem has blown so up in the last year. Like we do so much volume. We do more volume of wrapped Ethereum on Solana than Ethereum does of Ethereum on Ethereum. I said that weird, but you know what I'm saying. Like we do like a lot of volume in our DeFi ecosystem, and one example of that's just all these projects that are being built. You can feel free to, and part of the reason why we do all these hacker houses and all these other things for our ecosystem is to connect these, because a lot of these will produce something on chain. Anybody can use them. And so it's about just connecting with people and seeing what their goals of their project is, how they might be able to work together. And so what this kind of has happened is, instead of, I don't know, in a typical Web2 company, Google, they've come up with some infrastructure, maybe a search engine, right? And then they have some CEO or some board or some whatever say, hey, we need a team that can do ads. We need a team that can do maps. We need a team that can do whatever, so that we can really profit on this search algorithm. But in Web3, it offers much differently. You have just this base, or at least the way that we're operating is we're operating permissionlessly. So anybody can just find the economic incentive. So a game can come on and do their thing. They can choose to interact with people or not. And they just get to choose what they mint to the blockchain. And their players then can choose what they do with those. They have some economic incentive to find a way to use those, or they can just have fun, or, the kind of sky's the limit. And you can have one market maker team up to give liquidity to a liquidity pool for a swap, and that swap can then integrate with some order book to do something. So one of the really cool things that you may have heard of is we have a live order book. It's called Serum. That's as far as I know, one of the only non-custodial dexes that is order book based that sees a lot. And that's why we do more transactions per day than all the Ethereum EVM compatible blockchains in the top 50 combined. And it's because we have a live order book. That's most of it, is people are live trading on a decentralized application. That's because it's so cheap. Instead of paying, I don't know, whatever Coinbase's rates, ridiculous rates are these days of it's a fraction of percent that adds up per trade. Instead of that, it's just 0.025 cents for each order on Solana. So there's a live order book that people are making very profitable trades on. There was this very noticeable example that was happening on Twitter the other day, where somebody did an arbitrage across 4 trades, profitably made a 2.6 cent arbitrage trade profitably, which is basically unheard of in blockchain. I know it's kind of silly, but it's really hard to do that. And kind of Solana enables that. And it was across multiple different protocols, because it's all shared state, and you just have these bots that are looking across protocols, looking for arbitrage across those protocols, and it was able to clear the market, is basically what's called. So the price set stabilization, which is a really powerful concept. Yeah, and even and anybody in the ecosystem can utilize that, because you don't have to worry if you go to any of the order books on Solana. You just kind of have a sense that this is the right price. I'm not going to get swindled if I go on this one versus that one, because you know that the prices are being set accurately across the whole ecosystem. You don't have to worry about being on some shard or something like that, where there's not liquidity, and that maybe you're getting a bad deal there, and maybe you have to figure out which shard to bridge to in order to get the right price for your good or the right lending protocol. But yeah, there's just tons of stuff here to work through. Okay, and so I just want to kind of end my talk to kind of like why I'm here. I don't really think about a lot of these things in terms of consumption, like definitely in terms of joy and stuff like that. But I think of blockchain incentives are about incentivizing value creation in a transparent way. So it's, even if you're producing a game, I think everybody understands what they're getting or what they're not getting. It's all in code. You're sharing the same data. And I think that's just a very, very powerful thing. And so I think when like something like a game like Rahul was talking about, like, hey, yeah, I don't know, maybe we're producing the next great IP that can be doing something like awesome for this world, and maybe we're doing something else, but like the incentives are there for both him to produce the most valuable game that he can, and most awesome assets with underlying lore and everything, and then the people who are buying those assets have incentives to have fun, you know, like that, so they're getting to have fun, but they could do whatever they want with it. They have the open data of what that thing is, so they could, I don't know, yeah, make a movie, they could make whatever, they could make a side betting market, they could I don't know, make a red versus blue type skit. I don't know if anybody remembers like the Halo days of some just like silly story, and they would, then everybody would be incentive aligned, because the original creator still, because the value of the things are going up, the original creator is all good. So that one of the problems with a lot of the content creation and, you know, and mods and a lot of these things that happen in traditional gaming is it's not really incentive aligned. So if I play on like a Grand Theft Auto RP server, which is a very popular server on top of the Grand Theft Auto 5, that doesn't go back to Rockstar, which is the creator of Rockstar, or sorry, which is the creator of Grand Theft Auto. They only see implicit money by the you know, a lot of people playing it, but nobody interacting with that is monetizing all they did is buy the game for $20. They're not increasing the value of any entity or bringing any consistent revenue back to Rockstar. And so Rockstar always pushes back against it and tries to create these frictions in order to do those kinds of things. But they wouldn't really have to do that if they disintegrated blockchain. You'd be totally fine, or at least much more fine, with a bunch of mods and a bunch of these things if you just had royalties built into those assets in a way that is, as long as people were making fun stuff with it, your value of your stuff was going up, and you'd be fine because you'd be getting royalty on any trades and interaction with that. And so it's a much more healthy ecosystem, and that's why these ecosystems become much more composable, because all you're really trying to do is increase the value of what you're trying to, you know, what you provide to the ecosystem. And that's what I think is like a really powerful concept, both on like a company level. There isn't necessarily a CEO dictating everything across the entire ecosystem, and then every individual can just create their value, and all the way down to even to the end consumer, and I think that's an incredibly powerful concept that we're just starting to explore what that means. Yeah, that's kind of, I guess we're at the 15-minute mark, so I think that's done with my presentation part. So happy to answer any questions.
All right, sorry, just getting myself unmuted. Thank you for that presentation. I will be the deliverer of these questions. But first, a couple from me. So one of the things that you talked about that's very different between Solana and Ethereum is the kind of separation between, you know, programs living in their own space and being able to interact with those programs without deploying your own copy of it. As a developer who's like composing a new product from existing programs, how do they discover that those programs exist? Like, is there a tool for searching the library of things that are out there to understand their interfaces and
Yeah,
from the fact that they exist?
yeah. So Anchor is a protocol that like basically a simplification layer on top of the core Solana programming, and they have a list of all all the ones that they know about, and then the source code of all the ones that they've confirmed with the source. So that's a good. I'll link that in chat.
Cool. So you can use Anchor and that kind of like an IDE does, like autocomplete, or helps you find the tools or the libraries that are already out there.
Yeah, here I'll link in chat. It doesn't. This I may not be linking the exact right, like link to exactly what I'm talking about, but this is the protocol. It's not a protocol. It's a framework on top of Solana. So, but they do a lot of other things. They're actually related to Serum, by the way. So a lot of things use this framework, and they maybe buried it where exactly this confirmation list is of all of them. But even the ecosystem list will show you all the ones that kind of are what they're doing. There's varying levels of closed and open source within that, but yeah. And then we also have these hacker houses and other things where you can kind of knowledge share that way. The space, I will say, the space is moving so fast. It is hard in direct documentation to keep up with all of it, even if you're kind of having people open source maintain it. And yes, Armani is based. Thanks for that, Anand. Yeah, Armani is basically the founder of Anchor, and he's just yeah, he's an OG and like did really good. Yeah, it's could increase the value of the ecosystem immensely by making it more accessible.
One of the things you mentioned at the end is that you are kind of excited by the projects that are aligning the incentives properly and aligning them in such a way that people are motivated to create new value. Do you have any examples of projects that you think are doing that particularly well that folks should be looking to?
I mean, I think the most obvious example is just Basie. I mean, because all they did is mint some stuff on the blockchain. Like that's it, you know, and then they started producing some events, but so many other people in their community started producing events too. You know, everybody's incentivized to add value to that ecosystem, which is really awesome. But I mean, even something like the sandbox, if I buy a plot of land, I am incentivized to build it up in the neatest way possible because I benefit from my land going in value, and so does, and they're just being more valuable things in the ecosystem. So does the sandbox. Like that is the core concept. It's really that simple.
Some of the questions that we got from our community here on the call. Kyle asked, is the transaction price on Solana going to go up over time?
That's a really good question. So we scale horizontally with hardware. Like right now we've never had a full block, and I think we have, I don't know, 24 threads recommendation. It's not like we like hand pick or anything like that. It's just when it comes to the slot time of the validator, are they going to perform the number of the necessary number of transactions? If they don't, then they get their weight gets reduced. So we would easily scale to much more scale if we had more transactions and economically incentivized to do so at the current rates. That limit is very high. We can even with consumer grade hardware, you can get up to like 64 threads pretty easily, even like 120 threads. Like it's not impossible. So it's unlikely for the threads for the normal transaction fee to go up anytime soon. Like that would be really crazy. We basically take over the internet if that was the case. Now, the one caveat to that is what are called blocking transactions. So if instead of person A and person B transacting and person D and person F transacting like separately, if everybody wanted to transact with person A for whatever reason, and this happens on IDOs and mints and stuff like that. So it's not completely uncommon. That are hitting the same piece of memory, so you can't parallelize it. You have to make sure they're sequential so you know when you run out and stuff like that. That's actually what we've seen with the congestion recently, by the way. We're not handling the batching correctly. This is where we can go into some of the technical details, but those are, part of our roadmap is making that more and more optimal over time. And it's all known problems. It's just about developing the solutions that we know to be good. But one of those solutions is making fee markets. So just for that account. So, and it would just be around that thread. So any normal activity, if person A and person B and person C and person D are transacting, that's all well and good. They'll pay their sub-cent thing. But if a bunch of people just really want this mint and they're willing to pay for it on, account X, then they might have to pay a little bit more just for that account ordering. So that's something that we're still playing around the exact economic incentives of that. But that would be the only time in any sort of realistic future where we literally haven't taken over the internet that there would be an increase in transactions.
So in terms of taking over the internet, we have a question from Philip. What is the size of the Solana blockchain and how is it expected to grow over time? In other words, when will you take over the internet?
Yes, well, I think there's a different type of size. So we do so many transactions that we don't store the entire state from Genesis in memory like Ethereum does. And we've gotten some flack on that, but Ethereum is not going to do that in Ethereum 2.0. So it's just a reality of life. If you're going to have this level of performance and this much throughput, you're not really going to store it all in active state. So that lives, each validator stores basically their archive. And then we have a couple archives that we distribute ourselves. But the thing that really matters is the active state. And that's what's decentralized across, we have 1,500 validators who store it. And then we have nodes on top of those validators that also store it. I think I have around 2,000. So there's basically around 4,000 that store that live state and confirm that live state. And the other nice thing about the proof of history mechanism is the signet, when that state is confirmed, it's signed for by everybody in a provably sequential way. So everybody can prove that they have the right state. So said another way, it only takes one person with the right state, and they can prove they have the right state. So this is after consensus is done, they can actually prove it. That's actually different than Ethereum. In Ethereum, you wouldn't have that exact proof. You'd have to reform consensus if there was ever. That's why there's so many merge conflicts. It's like that kind of idea is actually really powerful. Yeah. So once things get confirmed, it's good. So the active state is going to grow over time. For sure, as more and more mints and more things get in active state. But we scale with solid state disk drive, so it doesn't have to be stored in memory. It's like a hash table from your memory into a solid state disk, and that's a lot of memory. I mean, it's not. We don't see that as much of a limitation. You're economically incentivized to do so. You pay on Solana, you pay what's called rent in order to allocate more disk size. So if you paid more rent for more disk size, then we just get more solid state disks, and those can be parallelized. You can get multiple, like 1 terabyte solid state disk, and you just can buy, as people get more and more rent, you can just buy more and more and more. So it's not really an issue.
Another question from Anand. What's the reasoning / incentive behind interpreting BPF code on the VM? Are there plans to JIT natively on kernel?
Let's see. So I think it's an efficiency thing. This is going a little bit out of the scope of my understanding. Let's see. I'll go the other way. There are plans of being EVM compatible. So the BPF, like it's a loader, it's like I think it's the efficiency basically. But it is more flexible than the EVM. So we're actually making an EVM compatible. We're both making a Solidity compatible compiler into Berkeley Packet. But we're also somebody's making a Neon. Well, so the Solidity compiler is us, and then Neon Labs is building on that to be fully EVM compatible, which means you can actually have an Ethereum address, and that can live natively on Solana and interact with other Solana programs, similarly to what I've talked about today. So that's gonna be really cool. It's a complex problem, but they're actually about 80% of the way done. So by 80% of the way done, it's like number of instructions and other types of processes. And so they've got most of the simple ones that do most things actually. So, and they're actually on DevNet right now. So you can kind of toy around with it if you really wanted to. It's volatile or whatever, it's active development. So yeah, yeah. So at that point, like, I don't know, we're not that much different than say, Avalanche or something, where part of us, where you have the optionality of doing EVM compatible stuff, where you have the optionality of doing, they have their native Avalanche virtual machine. You would have, our Solana package. So like at that point, yeah, it's really flexible, and you can kind of port. We want to be as composable as possible, not just within our own ecosystem. We want to support, like, one of the foundation things that they do is support bridges too. So we have all bridge and wormhole, and there's much more coming online, because yeah, we definitely believe in a future where we're composable. Part of it is a user acquisition strategy. Once people kind of touch us, they tend not to want to go back to other chains, just because of performance and awesome reasons. So like that's part of it. But yeah, we want to be as composable as possible.
Question from Ryan. What gaming primitives exist or will exist on Solana such that one can run non-asset items on chain?
Non-what items on chain?
Non-asset items. I think the intent of the question is around, are there features or programs in Solana that'll support not just like knowing that an item exists, but maybe computational things that you'd want to do in the game with that item?
Oh, gotcha. Oh, okay. Well, okay, I'll start with the assets. So we do NFTs like 721 standard, but we actually don't need to do the 1155 standard. I can talk this, but it's kind of a constraint standard. Actually, I helped write it back. I didn't go too much into my background, but I mildly helped write it back in 2016, 2017. But it was mainly to get over this whole issue, like basically this programmatic model where the programs sit differently from the data. The 1155 exists because of Ethereum's attachment to that, so it's way more efficient if you only have to deploy the one instruction set, like transfers and whatever, and then pack all the data, all your fungible tokens and all of your non-fungible tokens within that one instruction set. That's not a thing on Solana. So we don't need the 1155 because they all works through the already deployed token program anyway. So we have a lot more flexibility to do other types of programs. So we're doing a lot with, having avatars and having parent NFTs, which is like an avatar and a bunch of things like, having the helmet and the breastplate or all that stuff. So that's some primitives that we're doing there, and a bunch of other things that people are building, lending and renting and all these other things. But in terms of primitives that non-asset items, like breeding is what we're thinking about coming out with. A lot of these become hard though, because games are very custom. Once you get away from like the core, this is what an asset is, and kind of this is how we think of good, like, goods, I guess. It's really hard, even with breeding, because every breeding is going to want to have their own special flavor, because the minute the users know exactly what the breeding is, then it kind of not ruins the gamification, but it definitely deteriorates the gamification of it all. So that's actually the reason why there's no technical barrier for us to produce those things. It's just actually hard to understand what the standard of any game logic would be. So that's we are definitely thinking about that though, and I think the first one you'll probably see is breeding, just because that's become enough of a standard. And what we will probably do is you'll have just like a basic, you insert two things, have some configuration on what to do with those two things, and then you would have to program your own program that we call cross program unification, that you would then call that program from the standard version, like with the primitive that we would come up with, and that program that you would provide would do all the, I don't know, augmentations and print out the new whatever child, whatever you bred. Yeah.
I know we're just about out of time, or maybe actually out of time. We have one last question from the audience though. Phil wants to know, is Solana looking into ZK rollups or anything of that sort? And does that overlap at all with the many transactions interacting with one account scenario?
So we are looking at different types of rollups. So right now, the most expensive thing on Solana is rent. And so rollups are data compression. So it's definitely something that we're looking into just to kind of ease that burden. There's trade-offs though. They're not all in the shared memory anymore. If they're in a zero knowledge is literally like you have no knowledge of the asset. So there are trade-offs with anything. In this case, it would just be a cost trade-off depending on your desire. But yeah, that and like that minting scenario is the kind of one you're talking about where people are fighting over it. But it's the actual number of transactions. There's no reason, at least no reason, again, in the foreseeable future to do any sort of like layer 2 that we see. We are enabling the cryptographic primitives necessary for it. There's like on curve and off curve cryptography that's there. And we're definitely doing that. It's just other than enabling the primitives, it's not that high value for us just because we've never had a full block yet, and we can easily scale with with natural validator incentives that exist today. So definitely something we are looking at though.
Awesome. I think that takes us past time. Matt, thank you for your presentation and your time answering these questions. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.